for this course. This is module 2, which implies that this is the second video that I'll be making for this course, Fine Art. In our previous module, we introduced ourselves to Fine Art, where we hereby we define Fine Art and give some explicit historical development to Fine Art. Now, this is module 2, and in this module, we'll be looking at the topic basic drawing techniques and fundamentals. This is the topic that we'll be treating in this module. Mainly, we'll be introducing ourselves to some normal basic drawing techniques and fundamentals. Now, we have the contents of the module 2. These drawing techniques that we'll be looking at will include the following. We have 1, holding tools, mark making and line control. So after that, we'll move on to basic shapes, proportions and simple compositions. Then afterwards, we'll move on to drawing static objects. That is drawing static and moving objects, still life basics, fruits, bottles and the likes. Then after that, we move on to introduction to shading, light and shadow. And finally, for this module, we'll be looking at the final subtopic that we'll be treating is samples of beginner exercise and common mistakes. So these are the contents of the module that we'll be addressing in this second module. However, it is important that we establish the fact that when we are talking about fine arts, a course as a fine arts, we can't be discussing other topics without making reference to these basic drawing techniques and enlightening us and teaching us on how to draw proper art, how to draw a proper art portrait, and the normal step by step guide in achieving all these basic things like drawing static objects and moving objects and the likes. So now let's move on to the introduction of for this module. We have drawing is a foundational skill that anyone can develop through observation. If you are an individual that is observant enough, you can definitely draw. So because it's a foundational skill that can be developed through observation, proper adequate practicing and understanding core principles, rather than just relying solely on innate talents. It is one thing to have the talent, and it is another thing to depict the talent and show it to the world. So to draw, it's not just about having the talents and the skills alone. It is all about consistency. Yes, consistent practicing of these acts that will lead to becoming a proper a professional artist that can actually draw. So it is a foundational skill that anyone can develop through observation, practice and understanding core principles, rather than relying solely on innate talents. Now, moving on, at its art, basic drawing begins with training the hand to produce confident, controlled lines, while training the eye to accurately perceive shapes, proportions, and spatial relationship in real world. So beginners should start with simple materials: a few graphite pencil, that's HB to 4B, a good eraser and a plain sketch paper, and focus on holding the pencil in varied grips. As a beginner, what should be the main focus of a such person is to start by with simple materials like a pencil, your eraser, your plain paper or sketch paper, and make sure you holding the pencil in a proper way that will be able to give you the perfect shape that you want. And also, we should also note that basic drawing begins with training the hand to produce confidence. The hand is mainly used to draw. So now it has to do with you train your hand to have the confidence in producing the shapes, and also training the eye to accurately perceive shapes, proportions, and spatial relationship in the real world while drawing. Now moving on, the pencil in varied grips, writing grip for position, overhand for flip strokes and the like. To build mark making confidence through daily warm-ups like straight lines, ellipses in boxes, and ghosting motions where you rehearse the stroke in air before committing to paper. So what we are trying to establish in this introduction is just the basic steps and the basic things that is necessary to draw in drawing, and to understand that drawing is not just about having the talents or the raw talents alone. It is more or less like the more you practice, the more you get better. Now let's move on to advanced drawing techniques and samples. Now, what do we mean by this advanced drawing and technique sample? Just like we can see in the image below. Now, advanced drawing techniques is built upon foundational skills like basic line work and simple shading, pushing artists toward greater realism, depth, texture, and expressive control. Now, these methods require patience, observation, and practice to master light behavior, form, and composition. So below are some key advanced techniques. Explain the details with visual examples to illustrate their application. You can obviously see the visual examples on our screen, where we can see we have drawing objects on from different angles, from 1 point, from 2 points, and 3 points, and the likes. Now, advanced shading and blending is focused on creating smooth gradients, subtle transitions, and lifelike volume using layered pencil work. Techniques, on the other hand, include arching, which could be parallel lines, cross arching, which has to do with intersecting layers for darker tones, and blending with tools like tortillons or tissue for soft edges. The artists control pressure and direction to build tonal values from light to dark, emphasizing highlights and mid-tone shadows and reflected light. So cross arching, on the other hand, and stippling they are precision-based methods for building tone without blending. Cross arching also involves multiple layers of intersecting lines at varying angles to increase density and darkness. I believe you are following that, which allow for rich contrast and directional textures. Now, perspective drawing at an advanced level, on the other hand, it incorporates 1 point, 2 points, and 3 point system, just like we can see in the diagram on the screen. 1 point, 2 point system, we can see the point of view of the 1 point. The 2 point system, we can see the point of view having 2 angles, while the 3 points, we can also see the point of view. Now, the physical points. Now let's move on. The 1 point, 2 points, and 3 point system, in order to accurately represent three-dimensional shape. 1 point perspective is suits interior views with parallel line converging to a single vanishing point. 2 points angles, on the other hand, it's angled buildings or objects viewed from a particular corner, while 3 points add dramatic height or depth. For instance, looking up at skyscrapers or down from above. Now, contour and cross contour lines go beyond simple outlines by describing form through curved lines that follow the surface of an object. Contour lines trace visible edges, while the other one, which is cross contour lines, it wrap around the form to show volume and direction. An example of this is following the curve of a sphere or a muzzle. Now, let's move on to holding tools, mark making, and line control. To hold your tools, hold your drawing tool correctly is the perfect way, and it is the key to confident mark making. You can definitely say holding drawing tool correctly is the gateway to confident mark making, as it directly influences control, fluidity, and fatigue during long sessions. Now, most beginners, they grip the pencil like they do when they are writing, which is very, very wrong. So with fingers close to the tip and precision in details, but this limits arm movements and causes shaky lines. Now, it is important to note that when you want to draw, it is different. The way you grab your pencil is quite different from the way you grab it when you are writing, because when you grab it the way you are writing, it will definitely obstruct the arm movement in order to have perfect drawing, and it might actually cause shaky lines as well. So now, mark making begins with understanding that lines are not just outlines but expressive tools conveying weight, speed, and emotion. You start with ghosting, and in doing this, what do we mean by starting with ghosting? You hover the pencil above the paper, you rehearse the motion in the air several times, then you commit to a single confident stroke without hesitation. Practice straight lines across the page, curved waves, overlapping ovals, and tapered lines that start and end thin. Line control is also there and very essential. It is essential because it improves dramatically through targeted exercise that isolates different aspects of hand circles or ellipses in tilted boxes to train smooth rotation from the wrist and elbow. So below are the visual examples of beginner line control and mark making exercises, including ghosting, ellipses, straight lines, and all. So we can see this image on the screen as it is shown. So these are the examples of mark making and line control that we can actually use. Now let's move on to the next subtopic, which is basic shapes, proportions, and simple compositions. Now, what do we mean by that? All complex forms in the world, they simplify into 4 basic geometric shapes: the sphere, which could be the cube, which could also be box, cylinder, and cone. That's the basic geometric shape that all complex forms in the world they revolves around. Now, proportion involve comparing relationships rather than guessing sizes. By you use the pencil and thumb slicing method, and in doing this, you hold your pencil at arm's length. Then after that, you align the tip with one edge of the object. Afterwards, you slide your thumb to mark the length, then compare it to another part. For instance, the bottle's height is twice its width. The bottle's height is twice its width. That's an example of how we can achieve a perfect drawing and proportion drawing. Now, simple composition. Sorry about that. Now, simple compositions organize these shapes on the page for balance and interest. You start with the rule of thirds by dividing your paper into 3 by 3 grid and place key elements along intersection or lines rather than dead centers. So here are example of basic geometric shapes and their construction in drawing below. Now we can see how to draw 3D shapes. We can see the cube, the cuboid, the cylinder, the cone, the sphere, and the pyramid. Now how to draw it, that's this on the screen for us. Now let's move to drawing static objects. The still life basics, fruits, bottles, drapery, and the likes. These are the static objects that we can actually draw. Now, still life drawing, it trains observation using immobile subjects like fruits, like bottles, like drapery also under controlled lighting. Fruits like apples, bananas, oranges, they offer organic irregular spheres with subtle surface variations, and stems ideal for practicing curves, highlights, and textures. And in drawing this, you begin with light construction lines. That is, you have to block in basic shapes. The sphere for fruits, cylinder for bottles, flowing curves for drapery, and the likes. Then after that, you refine your contours using slicing for accurate proportions. Common pitfalls include the following. We have the symbolic drawing, which is generic apple shapes, ignoring specifics, and then ignoring perspective is another common pitfalls, or rushing detail before structure. So over time, still life build foundational skills transferable to any subject. Experiments with arrangement for composition practice. So mastery comes from repeated observation of real setups rather than photos alone. That's how we can become a master of the distance. This, you can see the difference. Look at the pencil work of the jug and the apple that was drawn in the shape compared to the physical the digital one. Now let's move to introduction to shading, light, and shadow. Now shading creates the illusion of three-dimensional form and depth on a flat surface through value, that is light to dark tones. We have a single directional light source produces predictable patterns. The brightest area face the light, darkest recede. Key lights and shadow anatomy includes the following. We have highlights, light area, core shadows, cast shadow, and the likes, and conclusion shadow. Now you apply shading systematically, and in doing this, you have to block major light shadow shapes first. And in doing this, you squinting simplifies to big masses. Then you refine mid-tones and details. With proper practice, it also becomes intuitive, turning drawing from outlines into convincing three-dimensional illusion. Just like we can see the core shadow, form shadow, as it is highlighted in the image, as it is shown in the image on the screen. Now let's move to samples of beginner exercises and common mistakes. Now, beginner exercises build foundational skills progressively. You start with line warm-ups, that is 10 minutes daily, parallel straights, ghosted curves, ellipses, and boxes. These are the things that with line warm-up that you can do for control. Then you move to basic shape construction, draw sphere, cube, cylinder, cone from different angles, adding curves, contours. Then value scales and shaded basic forms, teach tone transition, impossible corrections, paper damage, and the likes. And symbol drawing, ignoring negative space and inconsistent light source. Overblending, when we overblend, it can also create muddy grace. Neglecting edges flattens form. These exercises and awareness of error, they accelerate improvement, turning beginner into observance, confidence drawers over weeks or months if well practiced. Now, in conclusion, mastering the fundamentals of drawing is a journey that requires patience. It is very, very essential. When you want to draw, you have to be very patient, patience and dedication. Now, by understanding tools, mark making and line control, artists can definitely develop the skills needed to create expressive and confident drawings. Now, the use of basic shapes, proportions, and simple compositions provides a foundation for construction complex forms and scenes. So as an artist, a professional artist, you progress to still life drawing. They learn to observe and render the subtleties of light, shadow, and textures. With consistent practice and a willingness to learn, artists can overcome common mistakes and develop their unique styles in a matter of time. So thank you. That will be the end for this.